I've always believed that kindness costs nothing. My mother taught me that when I was young, growing up in a small town in Ohio. She'd say, "Diane, we might not have much, but we always have enough to share." At 57, living in Austin, Texas, I still carried those words with me, even when the people closest to me didn't understand. It was a Thursday morning in late September, one of those beautiful autumn days when the Texas heat finally breaks and you can actually breathe outside. I was walking back from my morning coffee run at the cafe 3 blocks from our house in the Zilker neighborhood. The sun was just starting to warm the sidewalk, and I had my usual vanilla latte in hand, feeling grateful for the simple pleasure of a quiet morning walk. That's when I saw her. An elderly woman, probably in her 80s, was sitting on the bench at the bus stop near the corner of our street. She wore a thin cardigan that had seen better days, and her hands trembled slightly as she counted coins in her palm. Even from a distance, I could see the worry etched into her face. I slowed my pace, watching as she counted the change again and again, her lips moving silently. A bus pulled up, and the driver opened the doors. The woman stood, shuffled to the entrance, and held out her handful of coins. "I'm short 75 cents, I heard her say, her voice shaky. I counted it 3 times. I thought I had enough. The bus driver, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, shook his head. "Can't let you on without full fare, ma'am. Company policy." "Please," the woman said. "I have a doctor's appointment. I need to get to the clinic on Lamar Boulevard." "Sorry," the driver said, not unkindly but firmly. "I don't make the rules." Without thinking, I hurried forward. "Wait," I called out. I reached into my purse and pulled out a dollar bill. "Here, let me cover it." The woman turned to me, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, bless you, dear. Bless you." I handed the dollar to the driver and helped the woman up the steps. She squeezed my hand, and I felt the papery texture of her skin, the fragility of her grip. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means." I smiled. "It's just $1. I hope your appointment goes well." As the bus pulled away, I felt good. It was such a small thing, barely an inconvenience, but it had made a difference to that woman. I turned to continue my walk home, and that's when I heard the laughter. My neighbor, Kevin Patterson, was standing in his driveway, loading golf clubs into his Mercedes SUV. He was 42, worked in tech, and had opinions about everything. His wife, Amber, stood beside him in expensive workout clothes, holding a green juice. "Well, well," Kevin called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Saint Diane saves the day again." I felt my face flush but kept walking. "Seriously, Diane," Amber chimed in, her voice pitched high with amusement. "You do know that was probably a scam, right? She probably has a car parked around the corner." Kevin laughed. "Next time, why don't you just hand out 20s on the street corner?" Same effect. I stopped and turned to face them. "She needed help getting to a doctor's appointment." "Sure she did," Kevin said, rolling his eyes. "Let me guess. You also believe those guys on highway exit ramps really are veterans who fell on hard times?" "Some of them are," I said quietly. Amber shook her head, her perfectly highlighted hair not moving an inch. "You're so naive, Diane. People take advantage of soft touches like you all the time. That's probably why you and Tom are still driving that ancient Honda while we just upgraded to this." She patted the Mercedes affectionately. My husband Tom and I had been married for 32 years. We'd raised 3 children in our modest 3-bedroom house. We drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic because it ran perfectly fine, and we saw no reason to go into debt for a fancier car. But standing there with my neighbors laughing at me, I felt something I hadn't expected: shame. I hurried home, my coffee now cold, my good mood evaporated. Tom was in the kitchen, reading the newspaper and eating toast. At 60, he still had most of his hair, now silver, and the same kind eyes that had first attracted me to him decades ago. "You okay?" he asked, looking up. "You look upset." I told him what had happened. I expected him to be supportive, to tell me I'd done the right thing. Instead, he sighed and folded his newspaper. "Diane, honey, Kevin kind of has a point," he said. I stared at him. "What?" "I'm not saying you did anything wrong," he said quickly. "But you do have a tendency to give money to every person with a sad story. Remember last month when you gave $50 to that woman outside the grocery store? She needed gas money to get home," I said. "And the month before that, you bought groceries for that family you met at the food bank where you volunteer. They had 3 kids, Tom." He held up his hands. I know. and your heart is in the right place. But we're not wealthy people, Diane. We're living on my pension and our savings. We need to be smart about money. It was $1, I said, my voice rising. $1 to help an elderly woman get to a doctor's appointment. This time it was $1, Tom said. But it adds up, and Kevin's right that some people do take advantage of kind people like you. I felt something crack inside me. My own husband, the man who'd promised to stand by me through everything, was siding with our smug neighbors. That evening, our daughter Michelle came over for dinner with her husband, Brad. Michelle was 30, worked in marketing, and had inherited her father's practical nature. Over pasta, I mentioned what had happened that morning. "Oh, Mom," Michelle said, exchanging a glance with Brad. "You really need to be more careful. There are a lot of scammers out there." "She wasn't a scammer," I said. "She was an elderly woman who needed 75 cents. Brad, who worked in finance and loved to share his opinions on money management, jumped in. "The thing is, Diane, every dollar you give away is a dollar you're not investing in your future. At your age, you should be thinking about retirement security, not subsidizing strangers." I looked around the table at my family, the people who were supposed to know me best, who were supposed to understand my values, and all I saw were people who thought I was foolish. After they left, I retreated to our bedroom and cried. Not just because of the mockery from Kevin and Amber, but because my own family didn't understand why it mattered to me to help that woman. They saw $1 as a financial transaction. I saw it as a human connection, as the kind of world I wanted to live in. The next morning, I was still feeling raw when I drove to the community center where I volunteered twice a week, helping to organize their food pantry. It was work I'd been doing for 5 years, ever since I'd retired from my job as an elementary school teacher. My friend Rosa, who managed the center, took one look at my face and pulled me into her office. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything. Rosa, who was 62 and had immigrated from Mexico 40 years ago, listened quietly, her dark eyes full of understanding. "Your family, they don't understand," she said when I finished. "They see the dollar. You see the woman. That's the difference between people who have always had enough and people who remember what it's like to need help." "But maybe they're right," I said. "Maybe I am naive. Maybe I'm being taken advantage of." Rosa shook her head firmly. "Let me tell you something, Diane. When I first came to this country, I was 19, pregnant, alone. I didn't speak English well. I got on a bus to go to my cleaning job, and I didn't have enough money for the fare. I had counted wrong. The driver was going to make me get off. And a woman, an older black woman in a church dress, she paid for me. 75 cents, just like your old lady." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I never forgot that woman," Rosa continued. "Never forgot her kindness. It wasn't about the money. It was about being seen, being helped, being treated like a human being who mattered. You gave that woman the same gift." "My family thinks I'm stupid," I whispered. "Your family is scared," Rosa corrected gently. "They're scared of not having enough, of being taken advantage of the world being cruel. So they build walls. You, Diane, you build bridges. Don't let them make you ashamed of that." Rosa's words stayed with me for days. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, trying to reconcile the person I knew myself to be with the person my family seemed to think I was. I'd spent 32 years building a life with Tom, raising children who I thought shared my values. Had I been wrong about all of it? That weekend, I found myself pulling out old photo albums, looking at pictures from when Michelle and her brothers were young. There was one photo that stopped me cold. Michelle, maybe 7 years old, standing in our front yard with a lemonade stand. But this wasn't just any lemonade stand. The handmade sign read, "Lemonade for Hurricane Relief. All money goes to Red Cross." I remembered that day clearly. Hurricane Katrina had just devastated New Orleans, and the news coverage had been heartbreaking. Michelle had seen families on TV who'd lost everything, and she'd insisted on doing something to help. She'd spent an entire Saturday selling lemonade, raising $47 that we'd donated together. Where had that little girl gone? When had she become someone who thought helping strangers was foolish? I showed the photo to Tom that night. He studied it for a long time, his expression unreadable. "I remember this," he said finally. "She was so determined, wouldn't come inside even when it started getting dark. She learned it from watching us," I said quietly. "We taught her that helping others mattered, and now we're teaching her the opposite." Tom set the photo down carefully. I've been thinking about what I said, about the money, about Kevin being right. I was wrong, Diane. I let fear make me forget who we are. Fear of what? I asked. Of not having enough, of getting older and running out of money, of being vulnerable. He took my hand. But watching you these past few days, seeing how much my words hurt you, I realized something. We can have all the money in the world, but if we lose our compassion, our willingness to help others, then what's the point? What kind of life is that? Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my relationships with Tom and Michelle. Tom was trying to be more supportive, but I could still sense his hesitation every time I mentioned helping someone. Michelle called less frequently, and our conversations felt strained, careful, like we were both afraid of saying the wrong thing. I threw myself into my volunteer work at the community center, finding solace in the community there. The people who came to the food pantry didn't judge me for caring. They understood what it meant to need help, to rely on the kindness of strangers. One afternoon, I was sorting donated canned goods when a young mother came in with 2 small children. She looked exhausted, her clothes rumpled, her eyes red from crying. Rosa was helping her fill out paperwork while I kept the kids entertained with some toys we kept in the corner. "Miss Diane," the little boy said. He couldn't have been more than 5. "Are you a helper?" "I try to be," I said, smiling at him. "My mama says helpers are angels," he continued. "She says when we needed help, angels kept showing up." His words hit me hard. I wasn't an angel. I was just a woman who believed in doing what she could, when she could. But to this child, to his mother, that simple act of showing up, of caring, meant everything. When the mother finished with Rosa, she came over to collect her children. "Thank you," she said to me, "for everything this place does. 6 months ago, my husband left us. I lost my job. We were living in our car. Places like this, people like you saved us. We have an apartment now. I start a new job next week. We're going to be okay." After she left, I sat down heavily in one of the folding chairs. Rosa came and sat beside me. "You see," she said, "this is why we do what we do. Not for the thanks, not for recognition, but because it matters, because people matter." Then, in mid-October, everything changed. I was at the grocery store when I heard someone calling my name. I turned to see a well-dressed woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes hurrying toward me. "Diane Morrison?" she asked. "Yes," I said, confused. "I'm Janet Chen. You helped my mother a few weeks ago." At the bus stop, my heart skipped. The woman who needed change for the bus? Janet's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, that was my mom, Helen. She has dementia, Diane. She wandered out of our house that morning while I was in the shower. I was frantic, searching everywhere for her. She took her purse but got confused about how much money she needed. I felt my own eyes tearing up. "Is she okay?" "She's fine now," Janet said. "We found her at the clinic. She actually did have an appointment that day. Somehow remembered that. But the confusion with the money? Anyway, a woman on the bus told the clinic staff what had happened, how a kind stranger had helped her. They called me, and I've been trying to find you ever since. Someone at the coffee shop recognized the description and told me where you lived, and I've been hoping to run into you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "I wanted to give you this." "Oh no," I said quickly. "I don't want any money. I was happy to help." "It's not money," Janet said. "It's a thank you note from my mom. She wrote it during one of her clear moments. She wanted you to know what your kindness meant to her." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a card with flowers on it, and in shaky handwriting, it read, "Dear angel at the bus stop, you didn't just give me 75 cents. You gave me dignity. You saw me as a person worth helping. In a world that often ignores old people, especially old people who are confused, you stopped and cared. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists. Love, Helen." I started crying right there in the grocery store aisle. Janet hugged me, and we stood there for a moment, 2 women connected by a simple act of kindness. "Can I ask you something?" Janet said when we pulled apart. "Would you be willing to come to dinner sometime? I'd love for you to meet Mom again, when she's having a good day, and I want to hear more about you. Anyone who stops to help a confused elderly woman is someone I want to know." I agreed immediately, and we exchanged phone numbers. As I drove home, Helen's note on the passenger seat beside me, I felt something shift inside me. All the doubt, all the shame that my family's words had planted, began to dissolve. I hadn't been foolish. I hadn't been naive. I'd been human. I'd seen another human in need and responded with compassion, and it had mattered more than I could have known. That dinner happened 2 weeks later. I brought Tom, who was still skeptical, but agreed to come. Janet's home was beautiful, filled with family photos and warm light. Helen was there, having a good day, and she recognized me immediately. "The bus stop angel," she said, her face lighting up. Over dinner, Janet told us more about her mother's journey with dementia, about the challenges of caregiving, about her fear that morning when Helen had wandered off. "Your wife saved my mother that day," Janet told Tom. "If she'd tried to walk to the clinic, she could have gotten lost, ended up in traffic, anything. That dollar bought more than a bus ride. It bought safety. It bought dignity. It probably saved her life." I watched Tom's face change as he listened. The certainty, the judgment, slowly melted away, replaced by something that looked like shame and understanding mixed together. Janet also told us about Helen's life. She'd been a nurse for 40 years, working in emergency rooms, always the first to volunteer for the hardest shifts. She'd raised 4 children as a single mother after her husband died young. She'd spent her life helping others, and now, in her vulnerability, she'd needed help herself. "Mom always taught us that we're all connected," Janet said, "that helping someone else is never wasted, because we're all part of the same human family." When she wrote that note to you, Diane, it was one of her clearest moments in weeks. The memory of your kindness cut through the fog of her dementia. That's how powerful it was. On the drive home, Tom was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I was wrong." "Tom, no, let me finish," he said. "I was wrong, and Kevin was wrong, and Michelle was wrong. We were so focused on protecting ourselves from being taken advantage of that we forgot what really matters. You didn't. You never forgot." He reached over and took my hand. "I'm sorry I made you feel bad for being the person I fell in love with, the person who sees people who need help and doesn't hesitate. I'm sorry I let fear make me small." I squeezed his hand, feeling something heal between us. The next Sunday, I invited Michelle and Brad over again. Before dinner, I told them about meeting Janet and Helen, about learning the full story of that morning at the bus stop. I showed them Helen's note. Michelle cried. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so judgmental. I thought I was being smart and practical, but I was just being cold." "You were trying to protect me," I said. "I understand that. But sometimes protection becomes a prison. I don't want to live my life so afraid of being taken advantage of that I stop seeing people who genuinely need help." Brad nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been so focused on ROI and investment returns that I forgot the best return isn't always financial. Your kindness literally saved a woman's life. What's the ROI on that?" We talked for hours that night. Really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. Michelle told me that she'd been feeling empty lately, like something was missing from her life, despite her successful career and comfortable lifestyle. She'd been so focused on building security that she'd forgotten to build meaning. "I want to be more like you, Mom," she said. "I want to teach my kids, when Brad and I have them, the values you tried to teach me. I forgot them for a while, but I don't want to forget anymore." Something shifted in our family dynamic after that. Tom started joining me at the food pantry occasionally, and I could see how the work changed him. He met people who'd worked hard their whole lives and still fell on hard times. He met veterans who really were struggling. He met families who weren't scammers or lazy, just people who needed a hand up. Michelle signed up to volunteer at a women's shelter. She called me after her first shift, her voice choked with emotion. "Mom, I met a woman tonight who could have been me in different circumstances. She had a degree, a career, but her husband became abusive and she had to flee with nothing. How did I become so judgmental? How did I forget that we're all just one disaster away from needing help?" Even Brad started a program at his company to match employee donations to local charities, and he joined a board for a nonprofit that helped families experiencing homelessness. As for Kevin and Amber, I saw them a few weeks later, again loading golf clubs into their Mercedes. Kevin started to say something snarky, but I stopped him. "Kevin, I want to tell you about the woman I helped at the bus stop," I said. I told him Helen's story, told him about Janet, about how that $1 had meant so much more than money. When I finished, Kevin had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I guess I was wrong to laugh at you," he admitted. "I just assumed. I mean, you hear stories about scammers all the time." "We do," I agreed. "And yes, Sometimes people might take advantage, but I'd rather be taken advantage of once in a while than become so cynical that I miss the chance to really help someone who needs it. That's just me, though. Everyone has to make their own choice. Amber, surprisingly, spoke up. Could you tell me more about where you volunteer? I've been feeling like something's missing in my life. Maybe this is it. I have all this time and money, and I spend it on spin classes and shopping. And at the end of the day, I feel empty. I smiled. Come by the community center on Tuesday. I'd love to show you around. And she did come. Amber showed up that Tuesday in her expensive workout clothes, looking nervous and out of place. But Rosa welcomed her warmly, and within an hour, Amber was sorting donations and chatting with the other volunteers. She came back the next week and the week after that. This is the first time in years I felt like I'm doing something that matters, she told me one day. Kevin thinks I'm crazy, spending my Tuesdays at a food pantry instead of the country club, but I don't care. This feels real. In December, Janet organized a holiday gathering and invited me. It was a fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Association, inspired by her mother's journey. Helen was there, in a wheelchair now, but smiling, and when she saw me, she reached out her hand. I remember you, she said clearly. You're the kind one. Janet had invited Tom, Michelle, Brad, and even Rosa from the community center. As I looked around the room, I realized that my simple act of giving an elderly woman $1 had created ripples I never could have imagined. Tom and Michelle had rediscovered their compassion. Brad had started a charitable program at his company. Amber had found purpose, and Janet and I had become genuine friends. That night, driving home with Tom, I felt a profound sense of peace. The mockery that had hurt so much 3 months ago now seemed like a distant memory, a necessary catalyst for deeper conversations about values, about what it means to live a good life. You know what I realized? Tom said as we pulled into our driveway. You were never the one who needed to change. We did. You showed us what it means to live with an open heart, even when it's scary, even when people judge you for it. I looked at our modest house, our old Honda Civic still parked in the driveway, and I felt rich, not in money, but in the things that actually mattered, in genuine connections, in the knowledge that I'd made a difference, however small, in someone's life, in a family that was learning to lead with compassion instead of fear. The morning I gave an old lady change at the bus stop, my neighbor mocked me and my family laughed. But their laughter didn't last because they learned what I'd always known. Kindness is never wasted. Compassion is never foolish, and the smallest acts of generosity can create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. At 57, I'd spent most of my life trying to be good, trying to help, trying to leave the world a little better than I found it. For a brief moment, the people closest to me had made me doubt that approach, made me wonder if I was naive or foolish. But I wasn't naive. I was hopeful. And hope, I'd learned, is one of the most courageous things a person can choose. My mother had been right all those years ago. We always have enough to share, not just money, but kindness, dignity, recognition, love. These things cost us nothing and mean everything. And that $1 I gave to Helen? It was the best investment I ever made, not because of the recognition or the friendship that followed, but because it reminded me, and eventually my family, of who we wanted to be in this world. People who build bridges, not walls. People who see opportunities to help, not threats to avoid. People who understand that we're all just one bad day, one confusion, one moment of vulnerability away from being the person who needs 75 cents to get home. I still volunteer at the community center twice a week, now alongside Tom, and sometimes Amber. Rosa and I have become even closer friends, sisters of the heart, she calls us. Janet and I meet for coffee monthly, and Helen, on her good days, joins us. Michelle now brings her friends to help at the food pantry, spreading the message of compassion to her own circle. The following spring, Janet asked me to speak at an Alzheimer's Association event about the importance of treating people with dementia with dignity and kindness. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, I told the story of that September morning. I talked about the 75 cents, about the mockery, about the journey that small act of kindness had taken me on. We live in a world that often tells us to protect ourselves, to be suspicious, to look out for number one, I said. But I'm here to tell you that living with an open heart, being willing to help even when you're not sure if you should, that's not weakness. That's courage. That's what makes us human. The standing ovation I received wasn't what mattered, though it was touching. What mattered was the woman who came up to me afterward, tears streaming down her face, and said, "I saw someone who needed help yesterday, and I walked past them because I was afraid. After hearing your story, I'm never doing that again." And Kevin and Amber? They still drive their Mercedes and play golf every weekend. But Amber volunteers at the center now every week, and she's become one of our most dedicated helpers. Kevin even joined her once, and while he's not a regular volunteer, he donated money to help us expand our services. He never apologized directly for mocking me that morning, but his actions spoke louder than words. The world doesn't change all at once. It changes in small moments, in individual choices, in $1 bills handed to strangers who need them. And sometimes, those small moments create waves that transform not just the people we help, but ourselves and everyone around us. That's what I learned the morning I gave an old lady change for the bus. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness, and the laughter of those who don't understand, it never lasts. Because kindness always speaks louder than mockery, and love always outlasts fear. My life didn't become perfect after that day. Tom and I still argued sometimes about money. Michelle still occasionally worried about my safety when I helped strangers. But we'd all learned something valuable, that the risk of occasionally being taken advantage of is worth it for the chance to genuinely help someone in need. Because at the end of our lives, we won't remember the dollars we saved by being suspicious. We'll remember the moments we connected with another human being. We'll remember the times we chose compassion over cynicism. We'll remember the person we chose to be when it would have been easier to look away. I chose to see Helen that morning at the bus stop, and in seeing her, in acknowledging her dignity and her need, I saved more than just her. I saved myself and my family from a life lived behind walls of fear and judgment. That's the real story of the morning I gave an old lady change. It's not about the dollar. It's about the choice to remain open-hearted in a world that often tells us to close ourselves off. And it's about the beautiful, unexpected, transformative power of simple human kindness.